My cousin Renata drove a brand new car to my uncle's 6-month memorial. I noticed it in the parking lot, a silver sedan, current model year, still with the temporary paper plates. Renata had driven an older hatchback for years. I noticed the new car and filed it away as a small fact and didn't think more about it. After the memorial, I offered to help her carry some things to the car. She unlocked it and I put a box in the back seat. The glove compartment was slightly open, not unusual. The latch was a little loose, she mentioned it. Inside, visible without opening it further, was a folded piece of paper with the dealer's logo on it. I didn't open the glove compartment. I didn't reach in. I just saw the logo and the date on the receipt visible from the fold, and something in my brain did the calculation before I asked it to. 8 weeks after my uncle died, the estate was still open. Renata was the trustee. I said nothing. I drove home. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I called an attorney. My name is Alicia. I'm 36, and the receipt in the glove compartment of a car I wasn't supposed to notice is where this story starts and where the accountability my uncle deserved finally begins. I want to tell you about my Uncle Gerald's pharmacy because it explains who he was and why the car landed the way it did. He worked at the same independent pharmacy for 32 years, not a chain, a family-owned pharmacy in a neighborhood that had been changing around it for decades, the kind of place where the pharmacist knew their regulars by name and their medications by memory, and would call if something looked like it might interact badly with something else on their profile. Gerald was that pharmacist. He had never, in 32 years, made a dispensing error, something he mentioned rarely, but that his colleagues mentioned often, as an organizing fact about who he was. He checked everything twice. That was the phrase people used about him. He checked everything twice, not because he didn't trust himself, but because he understood that the margin for error was someone else's health, and he did not consider that an acceptable margin. He was precise because he believed precision was a form of respect for the person on the other end. He named Renata as trustee because she was organized, she was reliable, she was family, and because he trusted the combination of those 3 things to be sufficient. He had spent 32 years being precise in service of people who trusted him. He extended that same trust outward to the people in his life without checking twice. The car was purchased 8 weeks after his death. He had been precise his whole professional life. He had trusted Renata without the same precision he applied to everything else. I think about that. The pharmacist who checked everything twice, who made a choice at the end of his life based on trust rather than verification. I don't think he would have wanted a different ending to that story. I think he would have said, trust is what you do when you care about people. The checking is what you do when trust fails. He trusted, we checked. That's how it should work. The receipt in the glove compartment was visible for maybe 4 seconds while I put the box in the back seat. I almost didn't notice it. I noticed it because the dealer logo was distinctive and the date was in a large font at the top, and my brain, before I asked it to, did the arithmetic that my eyes fed it. 4 seconds. That is how close this came to not being found. I have thought about what would have happened if the glove compartment latch had not been loose, if the receipt had been fully inside rather than visible from the edge, if I had put the box in the car without glancing at the interior. The estate would have closed with the vehicle expense in the accounting. My father and Wanda would have received diminished distributions and never known why. Renata would have kept the car. 4 seconds changed that. I want to say it was vigilance, but it wasn't. It was luck and a loose latch and a brain that made a calculation I didn't instruct it to make. Gerald deserved more than luck as his protection. He deserved the accounting requested at 3 months, reviewed carefully, questioned by someone who understood what estate administration expenses should and shouldn't include. He got luck instead. It was enough. But luck is not a system, and the right lesson from this story is not to wait for a glove compartment to be slightly open. My Uncle Gerald was my father's older brother. He never married,
He had been a pharmacist for 35 years, precise, meticulous, the kind of professional who had never made a dispensing error in 3 decades because he checked everything twice and then checked it again. He lived alone in a house he owned outright, managed his finances carefully, and had accumulated over a lifetime of moderate income spent modestly an estate worth approximately $380,000. He had 2 beneficiaries, my father and his sister, my Aunt Wanda, split equally. His will also specified that any personal property of sentimental value should be offered first to family members before being sold. Renata was named Trustee, Wanda's daughter, who lived in the same city as Gerald, who had helped him occasionally in his later years, and who Gerald had trusted with the executor role because she was organized, reliable, and family. Renata and I are not close. We see each other at family events, exchange pleasantries, maintain the functional cordiality of cousins who grew up in different cities. She is capable, competent, the kind of person who manages things efficiently. I had no specific reason to distrust her. I had no reason to think much about her at all, until the parking lot. I called an estate attorney named Marcus, not my cousin Marcus, a different Marcus, the next week. I described what I had seen. He said, "Before we conclude anything, we need the estate accounting. As a beneficiary's family member, your father has the right to request it."
My father requested the accounting. Renata sent it 2 weeks later, 40 pages, organized, professional-looking, the work of someone who understood that the accounting needed to look right. Marcus reviewed it and called me back. He said, "There's a vehicle purchase on page 23, listed as estate administration expense, $38,000. A $38,000 vehicle listed as an estate administration expense for an estate that required no physical transportation of assets, no equipment, no operational vehicle. The estate of a single man whose assets were a house, a brokerage account, a savings account, and personal property, none of which required a $38,000 vehicle to administer." I said, "Is that legal?" Marcus said, "No. Estate administration expenses must be legitimate costs of administering the estate. Purchasing a personal vehicle and classifying it as an administration expense is self-dealing. It is a breach of fiduciary duty. Given the amount, it may also constitute felony theft from an estate." I sat with that for a moment. Felony theft from an estate. Renata, in her new silver car with the loose glove compartment latch, had committed what might be a felony. I said, "What do we do?" He said, "We file." The filing was a civil complaint for breach of fiduciary duty and self-dealing, accompanied by a request for a formal independent accounting of the estate and a petition for Renata's removal as trustee. Renata's attorney responded within 2 weeks. Her position: the vehicle was a legitimate estate expense, required for her management of the estate assets, and had been properly documented as such. She pointed to the estate accounting she had submitted. Marcus submitted a line-by-line rebuttal. He noted that the estate contained no assets requiring vehicular management, that Renata had used personal transportation for estate matters without incident for 6 months prior to the purchase, and that the vehicle, a current model year personal sedan, was inconsistent with any legitimate estate administration purpose. He also submitted the dealer receipt, which listed the purchaser as Renata, personally, not as trustee of the estate. The court ordered an independent accounting, and a court-appointed administrator reviewed the estate records over the following 6 weeks and produced a 40-page report. The vehicle was found to be an improper expense. 3 other disbursements, smaller, were also flagged as insufficiently documented. Total improper disbursements, $44,300. The vehicle was the largest, the rest were smaller, the kind of amounts that look almost reasonable on their own but accumulate into something else when listed together. Renata was removed as trustee. The independent administrator took over the estate.
My Aunt Wanda, Renata's mother, one of the two beneficiaries, was devastated in the way of a woman who loves her daughter and has just found out what her daughter did. She called me once during the proceedings. She did not yell. She asked me if there was any way to resolve it without the court involvement. I said, Renata needs to return the money. If she returns the money, there may be less court involvement, but the removal as trustee is already done, and the independent accounting is already underway. Wanda said, she didn't think of it as taking, she thought of it as an advance. She was going to make it right. I said, Aunt Wanda, an advance from an estate without authorization from the court or the beneficiaries is not an advance. It's a withdrawal without permission. It's the same thing whether she meant it to be permanent or not. Renata returned the $44,300 over 6 months, the full amount, without a separate civil suit because Marcus made clear that the alternative was escalation to criminal charges. The criminal avenue was discussed with the county prosecutor's office. Ultimately, with full restitution completed, the case was not pursued criminally. Renata was lucky in that specific way. She is also now someone with a civil finding of fiduciary breach on record, which has its own consequences. The estate was distributed properly by the independent administrator. My father and Wanda each received their equal share, as Gerald had specified. My father said something when the estate finally closed that I have thought about many times since. He said, Gerald trusted her. He would have been surprised. I thought about that. Gerald, who checked every prescription twice. Gerald, who had never made a dispensing error in 35 years because he understood that the person on the other end of his work was someone's family member, someone who was trusting him with something real. He had named Renata because she was organized and reliable, and she was family. He had believed those 3 things were sufficient. The car is, as far as I know, still in Renata's possession. The restitution has been paid, but there was no requirement to return the vehicle specifically. The cash equivalent was sufficient. She drives it. I see it occasionally at family events. The glove compartment latch is presumably fixed. I don't say anything when I see it. There is nothing useful to say. The money has been returned, the estate has been closed. Gerald's wishes have been honored, finally, by an administrator who had no personal stake in the outcome and who did the job correctly. That is the ending Gerald deserved. Something I want to say directly, because this story has a practical dimension. If you are a beneficiary of an estate and someone else is the executor or trustee, you have the right to request an accounting. You do not need a reason to request it. You do not need to suspect wrongdoing. The accounting is your right as a beneficiary, and exercising it is not an act of intrust. It is an act of appropriate oversight of someone who has been giving significant authority over assets that affect you. Ask for an accounting at 6 months. If it doesn't come, ask again. If it is incomplete or confusing, have an attorney review it. The oversight mechanisms exist precisely because trustee positions carry significant power and limited inherent accountability without them. I noticed the receipt because the glove compartment was slightly open and the dealer logo was visible, and something in my brain did a calculation I didn't ask it to do. That is luck, not vigilance. I should not have needed luck. I should have asked for an accounting at 3 months and reviewed it carefully. I had not, because I trusted Renata, because she seemed organized and reliable, and because she was family. She was organized, she was reliable, and she was family, and she bought herself a car with estate funds 8 weeks after my uncle died and listed it as an administration expense. Ask for the accounting. Read it. Have someone who understands estate documents look at it with you. Do not wait for the glove compartment to be slightly open. Gerald trusted people. That is a quality I loved about him. It is also what made what Renata did possible. The oversight is how you honor someone's trust without leaving it unprotected. Subscribe to Family Verdict for a new family betrayal story every week. If a trustee or executor has ever taken advantage of the authority they were given, tell me what happened in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one.